Hi, I'm Natasha Sinyanovich, a public radio journalist, and this is Women Like Sex, a myth-busting podcast that examines the many medical, scientific, and social facts about female sexuality that were never, in fact, facts. Especially the very modern-day belief that women don't like sex as much as men do. I'll be speaking with experts, educators, friends, comedians, and listeners of all ages, backgrounds, and parts of the globe to flip the scripts on myths and misconceptions that have long been dictated by not women. Together, we'll replace so much inaccurate messaging with healthier, smarter, factual facts and get the sex ed we wished we'd gotten. Having a microphone gets you more answers than having a uterus. That quote from this week's guest really resonates with me. Kate Helen Downey is an award-winning podcast producer, among her many hats, which you can read about at katehelendowney.com. Her investigative Cramped podcast was named a top 20 podcast of 2025 by The Atlantic and Audible. Before I listened to it, some of the questions I'd never thought to ask include, can you pass out from period pain, and is anyone studying that? If we use pee and poop for diagnostic sampling, why not menstrual blood? Does ibuprofen not show up at all in the bloodstream of a quarter of the people who just took it for menstrual cramps? Have crash test dummies been hurting women? The answers to these questions lie in what I call the there be dragons territory of medicine's long and abject refusal to study half the planet. As a result, female bodies suffer so much unnecessary pain, often in silent acceptance, including menstrual cramps, which can range from a little discomfort, like mine, to so debilitating they land you in the emergency room every few months, like Kate's. For more than 20 years, she had what she called death cramps. She'd throw up with her period, a lot. She'd often faint from the pain. She saw scores of doctors, and when the correct diagnosis finally came, Kate was told it was something her school nurse should have been able to spot: endometriosis. On the way to this diagnosis and subsequent operation, Kate picked up a mic, and in Cramped offers not only her journey for her own answers and relief, but expert scientific information about our bodies, our problematic medical system, and even sexist crash test dummies and countertops. We spoke in the fall, and I'm happy to say that she's now spent nearly a year without menstrual death cramps. Last, but by no means least, if you enjoy this fully independent, i.e. no-string budget podcast, please consider supporting it at the level of your choice at patreon.com/womenlikesex. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like I should call this episode No Such Thing as TMI, because from the moment we started talking, which I was going to pick you very generously, let me pick your brain about foundation funding and grant funding, we immediately started talking about all our vaginal and vulvar and various problems.
I mean, that's how most conversations go for me since starting Cramped is before I'll end up in a conversation with someone about their cramps, about their period pain, about their hysterectomy. And then half an hour later, I'll be like, what was your name?
Right. I do the same thing about people talking to people about their clitorises and how it could be a stranger at a dinner party that I've just met who mentioned something about the vagina. I'm like, that's not actually the sex organ.
Right.
It has no feeling. That's what gives men pleasure. So blah, 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 blah. And it's the clitoris. And do you know when it was, when the correct anatomy was finally proven? Or friends who will come to me and be like, or friends, strangers, acquaintances. Sometimes they will come to me with sexual problems or sex-related problems, or vaginal problems or vulva or clitoris. I'm like, I'm not actually a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I can't really help you with this stuff, but here are people that I've talked to who can. But you are a little bit different in that you have, I know you're not a doctor, but as you talk about on your show as well, like this DIY diagnostician and this DIY having to stitch together the problems that you've had. And so I'd love for you to talk about, why did you decide to do this, to go through this journey publicly, right? To figure out, first talk a little bit about your cramps, and then why was it so important to also share that?
Yeah. So since I got my first period when I was 14, I have had horrible, debilitating, severe period pain to the point where I will throw up multiple times in a day. Like every 10 minutes is usually what happens. I call these death cramps. They didn't happen every time I got my period, but it was maybe every 3 times I got my period, but with no discernible pattern. I would be in class and running to the bathroom to throw up and then going to the nurse's office and throwing up every 10 minutes until my pain got so bad I would pass out. My mom took me to the doctor very quickly because she didn't experience this. She knew this was not normal. She took me to my first gynecologist appointment, actually, the midwife who helped birth me, which was cool. But she was not super helpful for this problem because after an examination, my first pelvic exam, she said, look, everything is normal. And some women just get really bad period pain and it'll go away when you have your first baby. And I think telling that to a 14-year-old, not super helpful.
You're like, okay, great, but that could happen 25 years from now.
Exactly. Like, are you
Like,
telling me that I have to deal with this unless I get teen pregnant? Like, I imagine that'll bring some other problems. Essentially, the message I got from the first time this happened to me was not only like, you're weird and this doesn't happen to anybody else, but also there's nothing that we can do to help you.
right.
Like medicine, one, has never heard of this, and two, has nothing to help you other than like just take some ibuprofen, use a hot water bottle, don't like try to do anything strenuous around the time of your period, and yeah, good luck. And that was basically the advice I got. I'm grateful she didn't immediately try to put me on birth control. That I guess is a plus, but
Okay. Yeah.
it wasn't super helpful. And so I spent the first few years that I experienced this hiding it from everybody, trying to talk to my friends about it, but finding that like I didn't have the words for it, where I would say like, "Hey, do you get really bad period cramps?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, period cramps suck." Like, of course. And I was like, "Oh, so then is everyone experiencing this and I'm just like not handling it well?" Or am I like some medical mystery where no one's ever heard of this? And that is shameful too. Like, oh, my body's doing something nobody else's body is doing. And when you're, 15, 16, you're not like, let's look into this. You're like, hide it.
Right.
For years, I didn't know anyone else that this happened to. I thought it was just me. And then finally, when I went to college, I started being brave and opening up to people. Maybe the cheap vodka helped. And once in a while, I would meet someone who's like, oh my God, yes, I thought I was the only one. And I would have this amazing moment with someone else who had been going through the same thing, also thought they were the only one, also felt all this shame and stigma associated with it. And we would have this moment of like, you too, like, oh my God, yeah, doctors, my doctor can't tell me anything about this. I can't find anything that helps. Like, it's so crazy. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Like, what's going on? Just to learn that I'm not alone and that other people experience this too. And by the time I was in my 30s, I was much more comfortable talking publicly about this. And I had talked to so many people who experienced very similar things. And at this point in my life, I had seen probably a dozen or more different gynecologists. And what is it? Can you help me? I've never been diagnosed with anything. And they would do an ultrasound, it would show up normal, and they'd be like, yeah. I started hearing like, oh, it might be endometriosis, but if you only have pain on the day you get your period, it's really hard to diagnose, and the only thing you can do is surgery, and so you probably don't want to do that. And I never got referred to a specialist. I never got actually diagnosed with anything.
Is it that hard? I mean, is endometriosis because it's fairly, I mean, fairly common in the sense that it's something I've heard about
Right.
from a very young age. It's not a diagnosis or a condition that you're like, oh, first time I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing is we can get into that too, but I'll just finish like telling you the whole and anytime I talked online about anytime I talked on social media about my cramps, people would be like, "Oh, I have endometriosis and that's how it feels." And so I kind of assumed after a certain point like I think I just have endo, and I've never been able to like find a treatment path or like figure out how to afford to see a doctor about this because I'd never been referred to anybody. And so finally, I decided to get to the bottom of this. And I had so many questions that felt so basic. Like, how many other people are experiencing this on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Statistically, it's already seeming wrong that there are so many of us just that I've talked to, and that doctors are still going, huh, weird. Like they're just still shrugging at us. And it's like, well, if there's this many of us, you should have something for us, right? And also, I wanted to get to the bottom. I wanted to be like, what is my diagnosis? What is the treatment for this? And because I knew there were so many other people struggling with very similar things and also feeling isolated and like they didn't have any information or ideas of what treatment to pursue for this, I was like, I'll just do it publicly. I'll just broadcast what I'm doing to try to find my answer. Because I had a career full of science communication and talking to experts about things and interpreting scientific and medical and like academic papers into regular person speak, I was like, I'll just do this publicly, imperfectly. I'll share all of the steps that I'm taking and all of the like obstacles and like what I learn. And hopefully that will, one, show people that they're not alone if they're experiencing something like this. Essentially, I made the podcast I wish had existed when I was 15, if podcasts had existed when I was 15. So show them they're not alone. Show them information and like steps that they could take potentially to get a diagnosis and to get treatment, and hopefully provide resources to make it easier for them. That being said, like I'm not a doctor. I didn't go to medical school. Like I am not giving medical advice in any way. I am just sharing my experiences and my journey and hoping that it helps somebody. So after I started producing the podcast and started trying to find answers, I went to an endometriosis specialist and I got diagnosed with endometriosis and started treatment for that. And I had an endometriosis excision surgery about 5 months ago. So far, it's been 5 months, 5 periods, and I have not had death cramps since my surgery.
That is amazing. I mean, that is wonderful news in and of itself to begin like that.
Yeah.
I can't even begin to imagine the relief, because I've been lucky in the sense that when friends would tell me that they had bad cramps, it's like, okay, I get a little turbulent. So yeah, to suffer from something like that is because chronic pain is, I've had chronic pain in terms of IBS, digestive related stuff. And I remember even telling my mom, I don't know, I think it was in my late 20s. I was like, if the devil showed up and said, hey, all your pain will end. You will never feel pain when you're eating, because I would all the time. But you'll never see your loved ones again. And I was like, Mom, we've had a good run. We've had a really good run, but
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
deal with this anymore. It's like every other day.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, if I had been offered that deal in my 20s or early 30s of like, yeah, you will never have death cramps again, but you have to, yeah, never see your parents again, never see your loved ones again. Yeah, I would take it. I could start a new life. Like,
Yeah, it's like I've made good friends. I can make, I know how to make good
right.
friends. So, like, I'll survive. But so something that when we talked that first time, you mentioned that, was it the endometriosis specialist who said that this could have been diagnosed by your school nurse?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So my case is textbook endometriosis from very early, from like the first or second time I had my period. I had these horrible cramps. I have no other health problems. The kind of pain that I was having was very indicative of endo. I also experienced basically like mild but chronic constipation all the time since I was a kid, which is also a very typical red flag for endometriosis. Any kind of GI issues really are usually associated with endometriosis if you also have really bad period pain. So, yeah, my school nurse could have, if she had known about endometriosis, she could have caught it then and talked to my parents and said, like, hey, I think you need to bring her to a specialist. This is actually a push that they're doing in the endometriosis world for advocacy, is pushing for training of school nurses, because it's such a easy way to catch endometriosis is early on when people are getting their first periods or in the first few years of their periods. The first year of someone's period, like you can get really bad cramps. Like just your body's just figuring out periods. And so like it's
Yeah.
very common to get bad period pain in the first year and then it goes away. But for a lot of people, it doesn't go away and it sticks around forever. It doesn't change, and in fact it gets worse. And so by the time you're 15, 16, 17, if you are experiencing pain that is causing you to throw up, that is where you can't stand up, where you can't go to school once a month, like there's something wrong. And the fact that we have normalized period pain that is that severe is really bad for us. And so school nurses, that is a place where it could get caught. If someone is coming into the school nurse's office every month or every couple months and having this severe pain and having to go home, it's time to talk to the parents about like what this could be. Could this be endometriosis? Could this be adenomyosis? What local doctor or specialist could you take this person to
Yeah.
get checked out? You know, maybe they're not going to get surgery at 16, but like there are treatments and there are ways to treat this so that they don't feel like they have nothing that they can do to address this pain.
Well, it's like you say, the normalization of this pain just speaks to how little medicine has studied women. It hasn't really had to up until this millennium in experiments in medical testing. But yeah, the treatment of women's bodies as there be dragons territory.
Yeah,
We can't, they have these pesky, like as if men didn't have hormones. We have these pesky hormones that get in the way
right.
of them really being able to study us. It's like, well, if that's part of us, and it's part of every human, why wouldn't you do that? But how many women are known to have endometriosis? Because I know that there's like, and what I have, and I can talk about that in a minute, like there's about 20 to 25% of women are known to have it,
Hmm.
and probably many, many more, just because of how many women just live with certain types of pain that it's just, I mean, yeah, that you think are normal, that people tell you, well, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, this is systemic and broke my brain when I started learning about. And I'll be clear, like I have been a feminist my whole adult life. I thought we were doing pretty good. Like it really broke my brain to do the research for this podcast and really understand how under-researched female bodies are
Yeah.
and how excluded from all research female bodies are. You want to get real mad? There's some books I could recommend that go beyond the scope of medicine. Seatbelts are engineered for male bodies, and that is why women statistically get injured more often in car accidents and have more serious injuries because seatbelts and car seats are like the seats of cars, not like baby car
Yeah.
seats, but the seats of cars and seatbelts are engineered for male bodies and male weight distribution. And when they even bother to include a quote unquote female crash test dummy, they just size down the male crash test dummy to like an average female height. But our weight distribution is entirely different. Our bone density is entirely different. Like it is different. And the same thing happens in medicine.
I just want to say, when I was listening to the episode in which you talk about that,
Yeah.
I was walking the dog, I was out in the street, literally I turned it off in the middle of the street and just went, fuck.
Oh, yeah.
And again, with all of the stuff that I know and the work that I do, it's like it's never ending. It's an onion of how little women factor into all kinds of research that affect our lives
Yeah.
on physically,
No,
physiologically. I don't mean just our
physically.
livelihoods but like
Yeah.
our life and death situations.
Even like, I mean, I thought this was so funny and horrible that like countertops. I'm 5'2". And I've always been like, well, I'm short. All countertops are like a little too high for me. Like when I'm cutting things, I have to kind of like go on tiptoes sometimes. That's across the board. Countertops are actually engineered for male average height. And so it's just like, oh, we're literally like living in a world not built for us.
Even though men are not encouraged to use those countertops in kitchens
Right.
as much as women are.
Even the things that we're saying, like these are socially acceptable things for women to do. This is like your role in society is to like be in the kitchen and cooking.
Right.
It's like we're also not gonna make it like good, like easy for you or good for your body. We're even gonna engineer those things for male bodies and male specifications. Yeah. So and yeah, I took so many rage breaks while reading and researching for this of just realizing like, oh, that's how that works. God damn it. And having to scream into a pillow. But yeah, so sorry, I forgot your original question.
Oh, how many women are known to have endometriosis. I mean, you can never know the exact number of
Yeah.
any kind of medical problem that people have
Yeah.
because it's hard, but the gap between how many have them and these gaps are even larger when we talk about women's reproductive systems and sexual organs and
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to back up even further. So 90% of menstruating people experience some kind of pain with their period. Any kind of pain, 90% of people. That's how universal that experience is. About 30% of menstruating people experience severe pain on their period. And this meta study that I got this information from, which is the best information available to us at this time about how many people are experiencing severe menstrual pain, they list the statistics at between 2 and 29%, which is like, what is that? That's a garbage statistic. That is basically meaningless.
that's yeah, either hardly anyone or a third
Exactly.
of the population of and I say women and I say females as
Right.
a shortcut.
Going off of language, it's so funny because I did get some like reviews and comments that were like, why is she saying menstruating people? Like she means women, right? And it's like, well, not all women are menstruating. Some women are on birth control that makes them not get a period. Some women are postmenopausal. Some women are born without uteruses, like, and they're not worried about having a period. Like, I am trans inclusive and that's very important to me, but like I'm actually just being medically accurate here, which is really important. Having a period does not make you a woman. Not having a period does not make you not a woman.
Right.
Having a uterus doesn't make you a woman or not a woman. Like it is just it's crazy the degree to which the culture war has affected. It's like
Right.
I'm not even like I will fight about that, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm literally talking about women right now having periods that are debilitating them. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
So between 2 and 29% is the stat that is like official based on the data that we have. I say 30% as a like easy statistic to say, and also because we know it's underreported. We know people are not responding to their doctors in the affirmative for a number of reasons. And so about 30% of menstruating people are experiencing pain so severe once a month that they cannot do their regularly scheduled like daily lives. That's a lot of people. The back of the napkin math I did is it's roughly 522 million people worldwide every month.
That's half a billion people, half
Yeah.
a billion people.
And we know that that's probably super underreported. And so
Right,
like
of course, yeah.
so that's how many people are experiencing severe menstrual pain. Now, that can be caused by a number of different things. It's not just endometriosis that causes it, but I focus on endometriosis not just because it was my diagnosis, but because my story is sadly very, very common. In the US, it takes an average of between 7 and 10 years to be diagnosed with endometriosis, despite the fact that very often endometriosis symptoms are present from the first time you get your period.
Jesus.
That means between 7 and 10 years on average of debilitating pain once a month. And a lot of times with endo, it is throughout the month. You get pain with ovulation. You can have really bad GI issues, which are often misdiagnosed as Crohn's or ulcerative colitis
Mm-hmm.
and go through years of ineffective treatment because the root cause is not actually determined. For me, it was 22 years before I was diagnosed. That's part of the average, right? Some people get diagnosed earlier, some people get diagnosed way later or never.
Right.
But other things can cause severe menstrual pain. PCOS often causes irregular periods and severe menstrual pain when you do get your period.
What is
Polycystic ovarian syndrome. So
Oh, right.
it's a clinical problem with the hormones that causes you to have irregular periods. There's a lot of symptoms that go along with it, but it's a hormone issue that is often missed because it can be very subtle and because we don't study it.
Mm-hmm.
Adenomyosis is similar to endometriosis in that there are cells that are similar to the lining of the uterus that end up somewhere they shouldn't be. With endometriosis, they end up anywhere else in your body, usually in the pelvic cavity, like near your ovaries, fallopian tubes, bladder. But sometimes endometriosis lesions have been found in people's brains,
Wow, okay.
in lungs, in someone's nose. And so those cause scarring, bleeding, The scarring is called adhesions, and it means it can glue your organs together so they can't function properly. I personally had lesions around I had one of my fallopian tubes was wrapped around my ovary and glued to it, basically. And also, the end of one of my fallopian tubes was blocked and filled with fluid, which was causing a lot of other problems. And I also had some adhesions on the back of my uterus that was kind of gluing my uterus to the fascia on the side of my pelvic wall. Lots of people have adhesions that glue their colon to the side of their pelvic wall or even up to their ribs, which causes a ton of problems with constipation and digestion. Um, Adenomyosis is where those cells are actually inside the muscle of the uterus, where they are not supposed to be, and they're causing a ton of scarring and bleeding inside the muscle. And so that is a separate but related condition that causes severe menstrual pain, often very heavy bleeding, and that is more common in people who have already given birth, especially if they've had a C-section, which are also becoming more and more common. So there are so many other things that cause severe menstrual pain. Fibroids is another huge one. And fibroids can often be caught quicker just because they can be seen on an ultrasound.
Right.
And so those are often caught. But again, you need surgery for it. And they're very, very common. I can't remember the stat, but it's something like 70% of people with uteruses are going to have fibroids at some point before menopause, whether they're caught or not. And it's something that like we either don't hear about or doesn't get checked for or gets brushed off. But I focus on endometriosis a lot because it is, I think, one of the most underdiagnosed conditions. And it would be like right now, it is very hard to diagnose it because to technically be diagnosed, to officially be diagnosed, you have to have surgery. So they have to go in laparoscopically and remove tissue and then test the tissue or like look at the tissue under a microscope and determine whether it is endometrial-like cells that are existing outside of your uterus. And then they say, okay, you officially have endometriosis. And so often, like by the time you've got to surgery, you know you have it, but like it's not official. There is some very exciting work being done. The Rose Lab on Long Island has been working for over a decade now, studying menstrual blood, which they've never done before. Science has never looked at menstrual blood for anything other than stem cells.
My first reaction was like, no, what? And then it shouldn't be because I have to stop being surprised or shocked by any of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so stupid. It's the one bodily fluid that like has never been used for diagnostic purposes. We'll use piss for diagnostic purposes. We'll use poop for diagnostic purposes. I had to poop in a little like deli tray and send it to a lab for to get diagnosed with SIBO when I first got diagnosed with endometriosis. But to look at menstrual blood?
We'll use other blood. We'll use other type
Exactly.
of blood. They stick needles in your arms all the time.
I just did an episode about this. There are two startups in the Bay Area doing diagnostic work on menstrual blood, basically creating pads that do blood tests that you can do on like blood from your arm on menstrual blood. So like if the thing that's been approved by the FDA so far is testing A1C if you're diabetic. Turns out you don't have to do a finger prick if you're on your period. You could just use a pad that tells you like what your A1C is. And there's like STD test or STI testing.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things that they would usually do a blood draw for that if you're on your period, they can just use menstrual blood for that. But the thing that's most exciting to me is they are at this point developing a test for endometriosis using menstrual blood because it turns out because the menstrual blood is coming from the uterus, apparently there are very specific cellular differences in menstrual blood from people with endometriosis and menstrual blood from people who don't have endometriosis. So they literally like could just do a screening test with your menstrual blood and be like, yeah, you might have endometriosis.
Which is coming out of you anyway, which is like here.
Coming out of you anyway. The thing I keep saying about it is just like, yeah, they found differences in this menstrual blood because they looked.
Right.
Because they looked.
Right.
And nobody else looked. Nobody else was like, maybe there would be clues in the menstrual blood. Like,
and this is 21st century.
They were studying this for like 7 years. The phase 1 of the Rose study, they just announced this year, and they're moving to phase 2 where they're like testing the hypothesis. So in the next 10 years, 10, 15 years, we could have like you could go to the school nurse with horrible cramps and she could be like, let's like do a little diagnostic test on you, or like let's send you to the doctor to get this diagnostic test. Let me recommend this to your parents, and it will be non-invasive, non-surgical, and we can just get more information about what might be causing this pain for you, which seems so obvious.
It seems, yeah, it seems, oh my God, yeah. Um, but I want to backtrack. Maybe I should have asked you this first. The word cramps.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't really thought about that, or it had been there. I just hadn't connected the dots or just, heard it said out loud that we have one word. We have one word for a range of pain and with that one word, you cannot quantify and qualify anything very easily because if you and I both have cramps and I say, yeah, mine are pretty bad for me,
Right.
which meant that there were a few times where it was like, oh, I feel like I need to sit down.
Right.
Like I need to sit down for, I just need to take like just for a half an hour, and then I know it'll pass. Or, and the back is hurting because of my kid, like as opposed to you ending up in the hospital
Right.
every other month and sometimes every month. What's the medical term for cramps?
Yeah, so the medical term for period pain is dysmenorrhea.
Okay.
Translated from the Greek is dysfunctional menstrual bleeding, basically, or painful menstrual bleeding, which is funny because this term medically is used a lot of different ways.
Right.
Dysmenorrhea can just mean regular period pain, like any kind of cramping in your uterus. Dysmenorrhea can
Okay.
also, depending on who's using it and what they think it means, it can refer to severe menstrual pain. And then some doctors will use the term severe dysmenorrhea, meaning severe menstrual pain. So it is both a symptom and a diagnosis on its own. There's something, so doctors will use the term primary dysmenorrhea or secondary dysmenorrhea. Primary dysmenorrhea just means it's period pain, and that's all it is. There's nothing else causing it. It's just your uterus cramping and it hurts. Secondary dysmenorrhea means period pain that is caused by another problem. So if you have endometriosis, your period pain is secondary dysmenorrhea. So it would be dysmenorrhea secondary to endometriosis.
Okay.
But it makes it very easy for doctors to just write primary dysmenorrhea on your chart and be like, well, that's what it is. Take ibuprofen. And that is not an answer because even if you have no if you have no diagnosis for dysmenorrhea to be secondary to, you still deserve to know why you're in so much pain. And there are,
Exactly.
to do a very short version of something that takes me a whole episode to go through in my podcast, regular run-of-the-mill period cramps are caused by these little messengers called prostaglandins that are similar to hormones that get released when we have a drop in the hormone progesterone that signals the start of our period. And these are normal, good things to have. We need them. Prostaglandins are like they respond to this drop of progesterone and they are released into the bloodstream and they bind to the receptors in our uterus muscles and they tell the muscles of the uterus to start cramping, to constrict. And that is what starts our period. So we need those. We need the prostaglandins to tell the muscles to squeeze or we won't get our period, right? Because the squeezing of the muscle is part of what gets the blood out. What happens sometimes is because prostaglandins also react to other things in our body. Inflammation is prostaglandins, among other things, like rushing to the source of an injury or an irritation. So, what can happen is if our bodies are very sensitive to progesterone, we might release too many prostaglandins, more prostaglandins than are strictly necessary to start our period. And then all those prostaglandins connect to those receptors in the uterine muscle, and they are like screaming at the uterine muscle to squeeze more, squeeze more. And then we get something called ischemia, where the muscle is squeezed so tight that
Mm-hmm.
blood flow can't get through, it can't get oxygenated. And that pain is the muscle's way of saying, I'm going to die if I don't get oxygen. When this happens anywhere else in our body, it's called a Charlie horse. If it's
Wow.
happening, that's ischemia, and if it's happening
Wow.
in our arm, it's easy to, like, shake it out or, like, massage it. If it's happening in the uterus, way harder to, like, get oxygen to your uterus.
Damn, yeah.
That's just run of the mill. That's like if you are getting your period and you're not throwing up and you're not going to the hospital, but you're just like, ugh, my back hurts, my lower belly is aching. That's prostaglandins. And the reason ibuprofen and other NSAIDs really help with cramps a lot of the time is that they are prostaglandin blockers. They reduce the production of prostaglandin and they also block the prostaglandins from connecting with those receptors. So that's why like ibuprofen can work.
Mhm,
For
mhm.
about 25% of people with period pain, with severe period pain, ibuprofen doesn't work. It is not effective, and they don't know why. I was lucky enough to be able to visit the lab where they are studying this. Among other
Mhm.
things, it is I think, the only lab in the country getting NIH funding to study the mechanisms of period pain. And one of the things they are studying is why 25% of people with severe period pain do not respond to ibuprofen. And they did this crazy thing where they brought them into the lab, they administered ibuprofen, they took a blood draw 40 minutes later, and 25% of these people had no ibuprofen in their bloodstream. And they're just like, where did it go? What is happening? Like,
What?
so,
Wow.
it's wild.
Yeah, so much of this I feel like I'm entering a journey of this, and we will find out where it goes. Like, you are probably, apart from my boyfriend, the second or third person that knows that I have vulvodynia. And like, I am not embarrassed to talk about anything, but I did not talk about this because part of it was just like, oh, okay, it's just, it was
Hmm.
written off to estrogen levels. I was just told, okay, you've barely, you're not producing estrogen. So this is what it is. My gynecologist in Nashville, my PCP or GP or whatever you want to call, in Nashville, and then I moved to Syracuse, gynecologist here, and they were all like, just take just estrogen cream.
Yeah.
Estrogen orally isn't going to do anything because you want to target the receptacle of estrogen that is not produ or that is, producing very little of it. And thankfully, thanks to my gynecologist here, who then got mad at me, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
She sent me, there are a few specialists in the country
Mm,
that deal with this, and one
yeah.
is in Rochester, just an hour and a half down the street, down the road. And I went, and his first thing was like, yes, you can take estrogen if it makes you feel better, like psychologically, but it does nothing. It's a neurological problem. I was like, what? And it made me sad. Again, not embarrassed, not ashamed. It was sad. And as I even told the doctor, I was like kind of a fraud. I'm doing this show called Women Like Sex. And suddenly
Yeah.
it became so painful a few years ago. And it may have been caused by a car accident
Yeah. Yeah.
because it happened right after that, even though I had no like lower body damage. I had like the seatbelt
Right.
hurt me a little bit, and part of the dashboard left a big bruise because it was flying around the car. Left a big bruise in my arm. We were fine.
But
Like,
also trauma, like that's trauma, and trauma can create so many, like I after my surgery, and surgery is a trauma to all the systems of your body. I had so much trouble sleeping for like 3 months, and what I looked into it and I found a Reddit board for people who had had endometriosis surgery, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like any surgery makes your nervous system, it changes your nervous system. It shifts, I guess the anesthesia shifts your circadian rhythm, and it takes like 3 or 4 months to get back to normal." And it was like, "Oh my god, this is like
mhm.
minimally invasive surgery. I thought this was kind of like not that big a deal." I mean, it's a surgery, but
And why weren't you told that? Why
exactly.
weren't you told? The same with the doctor
Yeah.
here when he did the Q-tip test, which I think you've talked
Yeah.
about, like this was like touching parts of my vulva with a Q-tip and a wet one so that it wasn't even dry. And I was like,
Right.
fine, fine, fine. Tickle, like I'm extremely ticklish. I'm like, or nothing, or it's fine. To then excruciating pain that
Wow.
feels like the sharpest, most serrated knife going into the
Oh.
driest thing imaginable. And he's like, I didn't insert anything. I just touched you.
Ugh.
And I was like, what? And I explained to people, it's like, imagine if someone just touched the tip of your nose, just lightly, and you felt like a knife was being jammed up it, like a serrated knife.
Wow.
There
Yeah.
are women who experience it with all kinds of things, who can't use tampons,
Yeah,
who I don't
yeah.
know, I stopped using. But like for me, it's
Yeah.
just with penetration. And so we
Yeah.
found kind of workarounds.
Yeah.
And then going back to my gynecologist even and saying, "Hey, great news. The guy that you sent me to, who himself admits we don't know because, we don't know why this happens." And like, I think I mentioned to you, I tried an antidepressant whose secondary
Mhm.
function is a nerve pain blocker. And within 8 days, my nose was bleeding. I had
Oh,
cotton mouth to the point where it was just
oh
burning and I couldn't
God.
think about anything else. I was like, no, I'm off that. Gave me
Yeah.
gabapentin. We'll see that. Like everything to maybe not go the surgery route, which
Yeah.
seems to be the most effective, however. But when I went back to my gynecologist, because she hadn't studied this, she was like, "Oh, well, no, you still need estrogen." I'm like, he touched me, and
Right.
I
That's
felt a
not
stabbing. I
estrogen.
felt like someone was
Yeah.
stabbing. It was like, that's gotta be that's the yeah, the synapses aren't working. That's a neurological problem. And she was just like,
Right.
"Well, vaginal dryness at like your age." And later, I'm like, I don't have that. Like, I'm perfectly fine. Maybe it'll happen.
Right.
Great. I'll hold on to the
Right.
cream and I'll use it at some point.
Well, this is so similar. I think like the fact that we don't study this hormone function enough, it has multiple effects, right? Like it isn't just that we're like, "Oh, we don't know why this happens to you. Sorry, we don't have anything for you." Instead, what it turns into is like, we don't know, so here's birth control. Here's estrogen. And that is just supposed to fix any problem. When I had horrible cramps, I was put on birth control eventually and was told like this will fix it. I was on birth control for 5 or 6 years. I tried a couple different kinds. Did not help. Didn't help at all. It maybe took the frequency
Hmm.
down from like every other time to like every 3 or 4 times, but like nope, it didn't it was not enough and it wasn't worth the side effects, which were legion. Like, and so I just stopped. I just got off of it because it was not helping and it was the side effects were not worth it.
Right.
And I think I've heard a lot of the same thing and that is not to say that birth control is not an incredibly important tool. Like I also hate the things that are happening now with like the like Maha movement and like villainizing birth control, where like birth
Yeah.
control is a medication and a tool, and it's some people who have severe period pain get on birth control and it saves their lives. Like it works for them. And so that's incredibly important. And it's a tool that like needs to be in the tool belt. Not to mention, it's just really important for women to be able to have like agency and control over their own fertility
Right.
if they want to have it. Like, so that's incredibly important. And same with like HRT in all forms for menopause and anything else. But like for some people, it is a lifesaver. I've talked to women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, and HRT is like has saved their lives. And then I've talked to other people, and they're
Yeah.
like, I got put on estrogen, I got put on all this stuff. It was awful. My body hated it. And it's like all of that is valid because these hormone medications are used as like a panacea, as like a band-aid
Yeah.
of like, hey, try this. If it works, great. Shut up and get out of my face. If it doesn't work, I don't have anything for you and it's your fault. Like you must be doing something wrong. And it's like,
Yeah, it was like with this as well. Like what I found out as I started doing better research, and that's on me because I just kind of accepted as like it's a perimenopausal menopausal thing. This is just the way it is. And I know better as a journalist. I know better, and as a journalist working on gender violence and on anything that has to do with women, I know better. Yeah, and then I find out that 1 in 5 women that we know of has this,
mhm,
and it's vastly underreported.
right.
And it primarily affects women between the ages of 20 and 40. When I read that, I started screaming. I was like, it has nothing to do with perimenopause or menopause.
No, it doesn't. No, it
It's not
doesn't.
like someone who's got early onset menopause at the age of
Right.
22. It's a neurological something happens. It's like, again, it's that there be dragons territory.
Yeah.
And they're throwing things at you, or at least this guy that I found in Rochester, who I should give him a shout out, but I cannot remember his name right now. I actually want to call him, invite him onto the
Yeah.
podcast. Linder, I think is his name. At least he's honest to me, like, we don't know.
Right. Doctors need to be able to say that.
And he says that, and he's like, and we don't know because we don't study women. We haven't
Yeah.
studied women. I'm studying. He's a researcher as well. I'm studying, but they're like it's baby steps. They're at the
Yeah.
very beginning of this skyscraper. They're
Yeah.
in the basement still.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. This lab that I visited was doing basic like mechanism of literally like what hurts when you have your period pain. We like the common knowledge is that it is the uterus experiencing ischemia from too many prostaglandins, but as they are looking into it, they're like, oh no, there's actually so many different kinds of mechanisms for period pain. Some of it's inflammation, some of it's ischemia, some of it's prostaglandins, but some of it is like muscles pulling on each other and dysfunctional muscles. There's just so many different, for every different person, there's a different mix of causes and mechanisms. And like, we're just not there yet medically.
One last question and we could talk about this for 5 different episodes, I think, but media representation
Yeah.
and periods. And I know that you've talked about that in your podcast. And I wrote to you, like, I scream every time I see or hear anyone talking about women's cycles syncing up. I just want to like take a cartoon hammer over their head, and what would you like to ideal magic wand?
Oh my
What
God.
kind of increased media representation would you like in 3 minutes or less,
Yeah,
please?
I mean, I want to see people talking about this as openly as you talk about a headache or a stomach ache. And as just like a headache can be a mild annoyance or it can be a day ruining, like life ruining amount of pain, I want to see people in sitcoms like having period pain and dealing with it. I want to see I mean, we are seeing we saw a little bit of this at Grey's Anatomy.
Right.
There's been a little bit more representation lately, and like endometriosis has like crept in a little bit, but it's mostly in medical shows. I want to see cartoons for kids where somebody has period pain.
Yeah.
I've seen exactly one cartoon, and I forget the name of it right now, but it was from like the year 2000, and it was like a tweens cartoon, and it was a girl got her period and had to go to the ER. And even in that one, the nurse was just like, "Oh yeah, it's cramps. Like if you haven't had cramps before, like it can catch you by surprise." And it's like, do we not want to talk about how she was in so much pain? She felt like people don't just go to the ER for fun. Like,
Right.
and then she goes home and her mom's like, oh, you got your period? Like, sorry, you were so confused and you went to the ER for cramps. Like, you dummy. It's just like, come on. I don't think she would have gone to the ER if she wasn't in an enormous amount of pain. So,
Yeah.
I want to see more of that. I want to see books where, like, people are talking about this. I want to see people on interviews talking about. And honestly, like Billie Eilish does this in press sometimes. She'll be there, people will be like, "How are you today?" She'll be like, "Well, I have cramps, and I'm hurting, so but I'm here." And like, this is happening little by little. But I think there is still, if you are a 10-year-old, you haven't gotten your period yet, you should be able to see representations of like, what is a normal amount of pain? What's an amount of pain that we can just be like, oh, we all kind of go through this and it's okay.
Right.
And what's an amount of pain that if you feel that, you should go get medical attention, that you should know, that we all should know. Parents, friends, teachers, we all should be able to recognize an amount of period pain that is not okay, that is medically like needs help and needs treatment. And we don't have that. And we're not going to get that until we can speak openly about it to each other, one-on-one or in groups, and until we can speak publicly in the media about it as normally as if it's like a headache.
There's so much shame around so much of this, and like women
Yeah.
passing tampons are like drug dealers, are like stealthy.
Exactly.
But if men had periods, I don't know if they'd be throwing tampons across the room at each other in a classroom and call them bro sticks.
Right. Exactly. It would be no, they'd be free in every bathroom.
Yeah.
There'd be baskets of them everywhere. Yeah, it would be very different.
Well, I know you have to run, and I really appreciate you talking to me, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here, and I wish you luck with surgery or whatever you decide to do next with your medical
We'll
journey.
see. We'll see
Yeah.
where I end up with that. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
That was Kate Helen Downey, award-winning producer of the investigative podcast Cramped, which examines a lot of sadly and frustratingly new science about menstrual cramps and the female reproductive system more broadly. She busts so many enraging myths along the way. You can find her podcast on multiple platforms, and you can find her at katehelendowney.com and Kate Helen Downey on Instagram. Links are also available at womenlikesex.com/episodes/life after death cramps. Women Like Sex is a flipped script production. It is executive produced and edited by me, Natasha Stojanovic. Website design and artwork is by Ted Nunez. Edesio Martinez is associate producer. For more episodes and swag, or to subscribe to the podcast or Patreon, please visit womenlikesex.com, the Women Like Sex YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is Women Like Sex. Pass it on.